Smart Wi-Fi Nest thermostats and red light cameras. Hit the sting. Hello and welcome to the Adding Energy Podcast, a podcast about energy usage, energy efficiency, and energy issues. I'm your host, Mick Lane, but you can call me sir. Today, I want to talk to you about smart thermostats, but to give you a context in which to think about smart thermostats, I'm going to start by talking about red light cameras. I don't care if red light cameras are whatever, a thing, if you've gotten one, whether they're legal, whether they're validated. If you sell red light cameras, you say something like, we're going to charge you $60,000 to set up cameras and website and a system that takes pictures of intersections. Those pictures of intersections you can use for insurance claims, for tracking people who are breaking the rules. You can use for all kinds of good things to figure out what's going on and what's not. And you're also going to issue citations of the vehicles that are running the lights and the photos. And those citations are going to generate some revenue, let's say $1,000 a week. If they generate $1,000 a week for 60 weeks, that'll pay for itself in 14 months. There was a novel municipality that apparently did not follow that same standard setup. Now, I tried to find the actual story. I always had the impression that this was like a Paul Harvey type story. I couldn't find the actual one, so it might just be apocryphal, which means like made up. But as far as what was going on with that municipality, the only clue I'll give is that it wasn't a large one. It was a relatively small municipality. Programmable thermostats save energy by reducing the space temperature. We normally, when we're talking about programmable thermostats, the recommendation is usually 5 to 8 degrees for 2 8-hour periods per day. So that's like 2/3 of the day. The empirical testing that was done, double blind, yielded 12 to 18% savings using programmable thermostats. So the reason that is because it reduces how fast your house can actually lose heat, because all the calculations we do for how much heat it takes for ventilation and infiltration and conduction are all based off what's known as delta T. So that's the difference between the inside temperature and the outside temperature. So for all those things, we take a measurement, a variable, and we multiply it by that temperature differential. If you reduce that temperature differential, you actually reduce how fast your house can lose heat. So by reducing that temperature, you reduce how fast your house loses heat. And you knock down your utility bill. So we started using programmable thermostats because compared to just setting that at a temperature and leaving that for the whole year, you would then be saving those various changes below that temperature. So let's say 72 degrees, you set your house for that, you never need more heating, even though you might be comfortable at a different temperature. Now the programmable thermostat comes into play, and now you can even just change it while you're in bed. Maybe at bed you want it to be 65. Or maybe when you get out of bed, you don't need it 72, you set it to 68. With the programmable thermostat, you could then change that temperature through those phases. Now, we haven't always had the programmable thermostats we have now. Back in the 70s when we started doing this, they were really weird. They had knobs and contraptions and like timers and moving parts. And they were usually more like two thermostats and then something that went back and forth as to which one it was using. The oldest one of these I've seen was actually machined out of brass. It was somewhere around like 1920. It was actually run on air. That was really cool. So in the 80s, we got the calculator Casio watch, and that made these things a lot simpler. We now had a clock that could do a couple things, and it became fairly manageable with a couple buttons to set up your schedule, set up your temperatures, and then have it go through those relatively automatically. Now they were on batteries. Some of the old ones had to like plug into the wall, or crazy like 40-volt systems. So when you had the one device that just had, a couple either 9 volts or double A's in there to control the schedule and remember all the things, that was a pretty useful and helpful thing. They got better and better and better. Now, if you haven't bought a programmable thermostat in, say, like the last 10, 12 years, they've gotten a lot better, a lot more affordable, and you're getting a lot more functions in what is kind of the going rate thermostat. For something like $40 to $60, I just bought 3 for my current house. What I paid another 50% more on the thermostat for back in 2000 to get 7-day independent programming is now just an option in the setup menu. Also, the displays are better. The numbers are bigger. The backlighting's better. Most of those things changed from what maybe was a $200 thermostat back in 2000, 2005. Now that's like a $50 thermostat. So what's the difference? Oh, the difference is now the new $200 thermostat, which is something like a smart thermostat, Wi-Fi enabled thermostat, something like, I'm going to use the brand name of Nest. So the Nest thermostat offers a bunch of different functionalities, but here's the difference in concept. If you go buy the $50 programmable thermostat, it takes you like a month of heating season and a month of cooling season to get your temperatures and your set points right. Maybe you realize, I don't actually need the temperature to come up right when I think I'm going to wake up. I'll have it come up to temperature like an hour later. Maybe it gets cold too early at night in the winter on Friday nights because you're up later. So it takes a little time to get those temperatures, get those set points, and then figure out what they are. And then are you actually going through and trying to figure out, could I be fine at 66, or do I need it to be 67 or 68? The promise of the Nest thermostat was to take that function of building that time temperature schedule and making it for you. Now, it does it off a bunch of different things. It changes about every time they update the thermostat as to what is and what isn't in the actual equations and setups. The original ones were looking for things like light and motion. They were looking for whether or not your smartphone was connected to the local Wi-Fi. There's been things about looking at motion, looking at activity in the house and other variables that this thing can sense to determine whether it should be trying to reduce your energy usage or not. So, what they want you to do is they're just going to do whatever it wants, and then if you need more conditioning, you need more heat in the winter, you need more cooling in the summer, you walk up to the thermostat and you turn it. Now, for old school energy guys like me, touching the thermostat usually meant using more energy. Unless you were like, my parents' house, where it was like once you had dinner, Dad went over and turned the thermostat down for the night, and then when he woke up in the morning, he turned it back up again. Unless you're doing that simple manually setting back the temperature, going and touching the thermostat was always just, I'm just to spin this thing to the right, and at some point it's going to stop and it's going to catch up, and then all of a sudden it's going to be too hot in here, and now we're going to have to fix it. With the programmable thermostat, it was the inevitable hold button. Now the hold buttons have gotten smarter. They'll hold for a specific amount of time, like a temporary hold, which will either go for something like 4 hours or to the next change in schedule. They'll also have the permanent hold, which is the same one that you remember, the little blinking hold sign from 2000. And then the last one is like a timed end to the hold. I've seen it called vacation. I've seen it called like getaway, and you can just change it, and then in 5-7 days, whatever you set it for, it then goes back to the schedule. So there's a lot of different things that are better in the new thermostats. With the Nest thermostat, it's trying to catch things that you wouldn't catch to have a more variable schedule. So it's trying to figure out the occupied temperature and the unoccupied temperature on top of a daily temperature schedule. And so what it means to do is catch the difference when you go from soccer season to basketball season, and now you're not home on Tuesday nights, and now you are home on Thursday nights. It's also meant to catch that when you come home from spin class on Monday, that you're okay with the temperature being a little lower. The things with these programmable thermostats is that you still need to do all the good thermostat stuff first. You need it in a good location. You can't just put it on the hallway that goes to the upstairs. You can't just put it in a room that no one's ever in, or the room that gets all the sun, or the room that gets none of the sun. You still need the thermostat to be well located, especially if you're expecting people to interact with it, or if it's going to watch the room and try to figure out if people are walking by or turning the lights on. The Nest thermostat specifically has a few things that it does and doesn't like. One of the things it wants is a power, 24-volt power. So you can do that by connecting, if you have a 5-wire thermostat, usually it's something like the blue wire, you connect that to the transformer, and you can power the thermostat off that instead of using batteries. You can also put in a transformer somewhere else. Maybe if you have an outlet nearby the thermostat, you can put the transformer either in that box or next to that box. That's not a big expense. That's the kind of thing that most contractors, electricians, HVAC guys can give you a price of the phone, because they do enough of them where they know it's going to be somewhere in the $100 to $300, given your construction, your age, and the thermostats you're talking about. The other thing with those thermostats is I would be hesitant to put them in a house that I would deem exceptional. So if your house is built to like passive house standards, if it has a very strange or very bizarre or intricate system for heating and cooling, there's a lot of thermostats where the device's name is the same name on the thermostat. Now, sometimes that's just because they can get it out of the same shelf as the furnace or the whatever. But there's other times with like the electric in-floor heat, you really kind of want the one that's meant to do all the fancy things. So if you had like a VRF system, VVT, variable temperature, variable time, heat pumps, crazy heat pumps, really efficient systems. If your house looks like a house and it has a heating system that looks like a heating system, I wouldn't be too concerned. The perfect answer would be if you're replacing a Honeywell T87, which was the little brass or white circle with the one knob in it, and it, single set point. Doing those to a Nest thermostat, probably a great move every single time. So, what is the last thing I wanted you to think about? When we go back to that town with the red light cameras, I swear I heard this story from at least two sources. The townspeople argued not to put in the cameras. And if you have a small municipality that does not have horrible traffic problems and has properly timed traffic lights, the way the story went, they issued like one ticket in 6 months. So, don't get hung up on the Nest thermostat thinking that it's going to save you energy, especially if you already have a pretty good programmable thermostat. It will help you do a better job of your temperature schedule. It will help you, because you can adjust the temperature from your phone on the couch or your computer or whatever else maybe you change your temperature from your office before you go home because you're staying late or getting home early. All those types of things are cool and helpful. If your parents are the type of people who have a Linux box and smartphones and, control things from home and outer space, or, turn on the camera so they can see their bedroom even though when they're states away, those types of things, you're a great candidate for Nest thermostat. If you're the kind of person who still has an AM FM radio in a room of your house, you might not be the type to go after something like this. If you have the little devices, you call out the name, it beeps, and then sets a timer for you, this should feel like a fairly logical extension. So, those are my thoughts on smart thermostats, specifically the Nest, and don't be married to the fact that just because you're going to buy this thing, that it's going to reduce your energy usage. So, for the Adding Energy podcast, I am Mick Lane. Thanks for giving a lot.